My name is Rich Schmidt, here with Daniel Fay. It's February 24th, 2021. We're at his farm in Yamhill.
So, my name is Daniel Fay. I was born and raised in Switzerland. I grew up on a farm in a town called Weinfelden. And you guessed it, it's German for Winefield. And my parents, in fact, I'm a third generation grape grower. So my grandparents took over a dilapidated vineyard in the 1930s, and it was devastated by phylloxera and economically just run down. And they were working for a winery who owned the estate and kind of got it back in shape. And then my parents took over in the 1960s, early 60s, and they did that until about 2001 when they retired. And they still took care of their own vineyards until about 2011 when they completely retired. And so growing up on a farm, in hindsight, actually was a privilege. Although we were working, and we were working hard. My dad was somewhat of a tough guy. But he taught my sister, my brother, and myself work ethics. And he taught me the basics of growing grapes. So in the last 20 years here in Oregon, I could always say that whatever I asked my people to do, I was able to do myself. And I can lead by example. And it's not just walking around in clean clothes or driving around in a pickup and barely lowering the window and say, hey guys, how are you doing? But working alongside them and keeping up the pace and production. So we were growing grapes, we were also growing apples, and my dad also had a sow piglet operation on the side, so it was a mixed farm. He was also a certified master vintner, meaning that he was allowed to educate young Swiss how to grow grapes. It's an apprenticeship that lasts 3 years, and they spend 1 year at a time at different vineyards. And they live with the family and they work alongside the host. And the big benefit is they really learn the ropes of growing grapes, the basics that I sometimes have seen in Oregon being done wrong even now. And they also learn how to work. So we're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds fresh out of school, and they have to work 10-hour days, 55 hours a week. But my dad always told me, just because we have employees doesn't mean that my kids, talking about my father's kids, are going to be lazy. And I thank them both, my mom and my dad. I mean, they prepared me for life. They taught me some grit that really helped me out a lot in the last 50 years. So, but they also encouraged me to pursue a higher education just to keep more doors open. I graduated with a Master of Science degree from the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. And that was in 1994. Before and in between, I also served in the Swiss Army, like every male. And I was serving in the rank of a lieutenant, first lieutenant. And looking back, the Swiss Army taught me what I needed to know about leadership. There is no other way than leading combat troops, although not in a war zone, but in training. Leadership, as it implies in the word, has a point and a direction. You're in the front of people and you're leading that way. You can read all the books you want. If you cannot apply it in the field, if you cannot convert it into action, it doesn't do much. And I've seen it both. I've seen so-called leaders who failed miserably, and others I was ready to go through fire. As a part of my education, in 1992, I had the opportunity to go to UC Davis for several months and work in Dr. Cleaver's lab group. So we did trials, field trials, and lab work. And I had also plenty of time. It was a fairly easy life. I had plenty of time to travel and kind of do some adventures. But that's when I kind of started thinking about the United States and other opportunities. Looking back, I could have lived a life of milk and honey in Switzerland. I had a good job. So after I graduated, I had a teaching position at an ag college. Actually, before I graduated. And my mentor, who helped me with my thesis, said, no, you can't have a job. And I said, hey, there's no other way. This has to work. It's all on me to make it happen. And I can deal with stress and pressure. Don't worry about it. It will all work out. So I teach a position at an ag college. So these are apprentices, future farmers, who came to school. So they were working on a farm for 4 days a week, and they came to school 1 day a week. And I taught them basics like biology, soil science, chemistry, but also animal husbandry. So looking at the cattle here, I learned in theory first, but I did apply later on in practice. And I enjoyed the teaching part. I was in my 20s. I had a close connection with the teenagers, but I realized this is not what I want to do till I'm 60. And it was also in a state-run environment. Although they were talking about incentive or performance-based compensation, it was more like seniority-based. That's not an environment I thrive in. And now, compared to the company I'm working for now, it's all merit-based. It's not seniority-based. Switzerland is a great place to live. It's a great place to grow up in. It's a great place to visit. But there are a lot of rules, a lot of regulations. I understand why. It fits 6 times into Oregon. The population is double compared to the state of Oregon. And when you have more people, it takes more regulations. Why? Because you always have 5% of idiots who don't have common sense. And that's what the rules are for, and regulations. And then they become irrational, right? I mean, I could have never accomplished there what I have accomplished here. Purchasing land, building up a farm, and do it in a respectful way. So, also I have to tell you that the grape growing business my parents were in, I can tell you they made some money. Although it was hard work, but they made some money. In the 70s and 80s, it was a great business to be in. In the 90s, I can see the trend going the wrong way, where the money was on the winemaking side, on the winery side, and not in the field. And again, I'm thankful that my parents encouraged me to go for a higher education. I don't think they expected me to say, hey, adios, I'm leaving, I'm going to the United States. But now they accept it, and they're happy for me. So in 1998, I packed my stuff, and I immigrated to the US. And with a lot of hope, some prayer, and some ignorance. Because if I knew how many obstacles there are, it's always good in life not to know what's ahead of you. Because you deal with them one at a time, and you grow as a person, you overcome them, and learn from them, right? I was very fortunate that my professor at the time, Dr. Werner Koblet, knew all the pioneers in Oregon. David Lett, David Adelsheim, Dick Erath, Dick Ponzi. I mean, you name him, he knew him. And he gave me a list of people. And I called up David Adelsheim, had an interview with him. And my second one was, I called Joel Myers with Wine Tenders. And he interviewed me at the Shiloh in Newburgh. While Bill Clinton had to admit that he did something wrong in the Oval Office. And he told me that La Cruz, who owned Willacans Estate, are looking for an assistant vineyard manager. So Joe Myers at that time was managing Willacans Estate as a part of his portfolio, like he did Domaine Serene and other vineyards. And I was hired in September of 1998. In 99, I was promoted to vineyard manager, and I'm very thankful to Bernard and Ronnie Lacote to give me that chance. Somebody has to give you an opportunity. Somebody has to open a door to give you a chance to show what you can do. So, my first day at work, I was working alongside the Hispanic workforce, and they were probably wondering, what the heck is the white guy doing out here? And they were probably surprised that I can keep up with him, because that's what I did in Switzerland. I worked in the vineyards, physically. I also learned in my first 2-3 months working alongside Joel's crew how hard working people these are. Good people. There's just a core that's really solid. You know, they're family oriented, they're honest, they're just a pleasure to work with. And that respect never waned in the last 20 years. I respect them more than ever. So I stayed at Kansas State for 11 years. Had a good time. We were able to grow, add acreage, make some improvements, grow the brand. And it's not that I was always perfect, by no means. I had to learn a few things, get used to the customs here. I mean, there are written rules and unwritten rules, and sometimes I kind of violated some unwritten rules, and I apologize to all the people that I owe an apology to. But I can tell you, when it was time to show up, I showed up, and the overall performance was there. I can't think that we ever had a mildew outbreak. Never happened. I was open to the sustainability idea, because that's what we've done since the 80s. And the whole guidelines of life were actually adopted from Switzerland. So I was very familiar with them. But I also questioned some of the opinions, I call them, about sustainability. You know, I had discussions, I remember I had discussions with my employer, probably 2 or 3. We moved away from Roundup and from herbicide at all at that time. I had no problem doing so, but it was not just a black and white proposition. It's not like controlling weeds mechanically is all good and herbicide are all bad, you know? You think about the energy balance it takes. You know, you take an ATV, low impact, low compaction, fairly quickly, 1% solution of herbicide, or you have to run through with a heavy tractor, with an in-row cultivator, when the soil is still wet and you damage some irrigation lines, you're going to kill some grapevines, and suddenly it's not that clear anymore. Or you can do a combination. But I'm not a dogmatic guy. I'm more of a pragmatic guy. You know, I hope that common sense prevails. Now, I'm also thankful that the Lacotes allowed me to pursue a dream of mine. Back in 1992, I went to the California State Fair in Sacramento, and I saw my first longhorn there. And it was an aha moment. I tell you, I've noticed, such a beautiful animal standing in a pen. When I came over here, some of the dreams that packed in the suitcase were, I want to own some land one day. That's not something I could do in Switzerland. Land is way too expensive over there. Either way, you inherit it, or you win the lottery or something. But other than that, very tough. And it doesn't become available. I purchased 50-some acres out here on Yamhill in the year 2000. And I had to stretch myself under the rafters with the loan that I had to get. But it was all worth it. Now, the cattle that I purchased, they lived at Willackenzie. And to this day, we still have a cow herd there. Thank you to Jackson Family Wines, who bought Willackenzie in I believe in 2016, and they allowed me to continue with the grazing license. The cattle are happy over there. It's ideal. It's heaven for cattle. So, I also want to mention I had an opportunity to work alongside some very good winemakers. Initially, it was Laurent Montalieu. He was the winemaker until 2001. Also, the late Jimmy Brooks. Had a good time with him. And then Thibaut Mondet came along, and his assistant, Dominique Mahé. And it wasn't always an easy relationship. And it never is an easy relationship between grape growers and winemakers. But I can tell you we always respected one another. And also at Viticulture, I met my wife. And she's a rock. I can tell you she's a soulmate. And I'm so happy that she shares my passion for country life. And she shares my passion for these cattle. Fay Longhorns would not exist without Angelina. In 2009, 2010, I was kind of getting into a rut of getting stuck. I thought I'm not growing professionally anymore the way I should in my early 40s. So I have to back up. 1997, I was attending a college for a business college. And that was on Saturdays. Every Saturday I went to school while I was teaching at the Air College. And I remember I had an instructor, and he said, guys, there's one motto in life. Love it, leave it, love it, change it, or leave it. And I followed that motto all the way. Instead of complaining and not having the courage to change or do something about it. That's, I tell it to my employees as well. If they continue to be unhappy, I tell them, you don't love it anymore, let's see what we can change. If you're not capable of changing, you have options, right? I'd rather have you staying here, but love it, change it, or leave it. Still counts. So I was hired by Matt Novak, at that time president of Results Partners, in the position of an operations manager. And it was a real pleasure to work for him, and also alongside Mike Hirsch, who was at that time the general manager. But Mike already decided that he will return to his family farm in Madras. So I knew that I can move up to general manager in a relatively short time. But that first season was very important for me to learn the ropes, how RP does business. You know, RP is in the business of customer service, first and foremost. And I didn't see it that way when I worked at Kansas State. And today I would go about it in a different way. If I could rewind the time. So, and then in 2011, Matt was promoted to co-CEO of OVS, and I moved up to president in 2012. And then in short order, some very good people were hired. Evan Bellinger, Alex Cabrera, Luke Pedati, Lee Bartholomew, and we're talking some of the best in the business. And I tell you, if you ask me my best part of my job is working alongside this team. They are a tremendous asset, and we really work together well and complement each other's strengths and also weaknesses. I know where mine are, and I know where they're good at, and I put them right in the job or position to take over where I'm failing. But we're not only talking about the senior management rank. We also have, we call it the middle management rank. We have some very capable people there. And that's another one of my joys in my professional life. When I can see young people thrive, and you see they have talent, they have a good education, but they have work ethics and grit. And it's like, wow, remember 4 years ago, he could barely walk straight, and now he's managing 500 acres. Unbelievable. And we're not done yet. So to give an opportunity to people who want to move up and grow, in order to do that, you have to grow the company. And we've grown the company quite a bit. And some people want to hold it against us, but they have to show to us first where we have failed. And we're managing vineyards between 5 acres in size and over 200 acres in size. And they all matter to us. Every client matters. And I want to bring the example. So we own about 60 head of cattle. Every once in a while we need the vet. I'm calling Richard Wieman. And Richard Wieman is serving some big dairies. Dairy farms with thousands of cattle. And he's a top-notch professional. Now, I'm a relatively small fish in his pond. But when he shows up here, I know Rich is giving his best performance for the small guy right here. And that's how I want to do it for a small vineyard owner. Exactly the same way. I give you 100%. It might be part-time, but we're always there and we make sure the results are there. Another really nice side of my job is I get in contact with so many people, so many characters. It's unbelievable. And it's like the entertainment value is priceless. And I mean it in a positive way. I mean high-powered individuals, smart people, they're coming from all walks of life. Isn't that the interesting part on this world, that we can interact with other people who have other opinions and other experiences, and we can share them? It also gives me satisfaction when I see that we can really help realize somebody's dream. They come here to Oregon, they want to buy a piece of land, convert it to a vineyard, and we can be a part of that. And we are involved from start to finish in a successful project. That is just a real pleasure. And we're in the customer service business, as I mentioned. And I tell you, my definition of customer service is if I have your best interest, my client's best interest at heart, not just in my mind, but also at heart. And it could mean that the ideas you have, if they're really not the best, I mention it. I will give you the pros and cons, and you can choose where you want to go. But if people are walking down the wrong path, and we've seen it, and sometimes that's the frustrating part. We've seen people walking down the wrong path, and we want to stop them with civil and legal manners. And they're ignoring us. And it's like, that is frustrating. It happens every so often. So, on the negative side, actually, some people think being president of the company could be a lonely position. Thanks to my team, it's not. Thanks to the senior team, I never feel like I'm alone. I'm also hard-pressed if I ever had to make a decision where I'm outvoted, like 4-1 or 5-1. But if it's a 3-1 or 2-3, somebody has to decide at the end of the day. But I'm not ignorant. I listen to them, and I never claim that I'm the smartest guy in the room. I really don't. I know I'm not. But if you get the best out of the people working with you, I think I do a good part of my job. Negative. Sometimes you're dealing with some people who come into this business fairly green, but with a lot of ego. And I'm not talking about even clients. I'm talking about some people who are put in a position and they have to justify their position, and they want to raise their profile, and they're really clunky how they go about it. And you know, I was young once, and I thought I was invincible, and I thought I have all the answers. And the older I get, the more questions I have, and the fewer answers I have. And it doesn't even bother me. But when you have these young guns, and they're kind of right in your face, that's when I can turn quickly and tell them, you know what, take a breather. Take a breather. Show me a little bit of respect, I show you respect as well. Or start over. Let's introduce ourselves again. Rewind 5 minutes. I've done it. Just a shot of humility is not a bad thing. You know, when we have a good year, it's also a lot of luck. Okay? If we have a year without accidents, we have a lot of luck. And the safety aspect sometimes weighs heavily on me. We have a lot of people out there with a lot of equipment, thousands of hours on equipment, and not just flat ground, but steep and wet. And I'm thankful if everybody goes home at the end of the day in one piece. And if some things didn't go 100% right, I can accept it. I never said we are 100%. We are shooting for 100%. But if you get 90 or 90 plus, good enough. I want to see the perfect person yet. And you know, it's another thing. We heard, oh, so-and-so, oh, they're absolutely a superstar. In the RP world, you have to be very good. You have to be good. There are no superstars. None of us. None of us. But by working together, we are forced to reckon with. There's a lot of brain power and there's a lot of muscle. You combine the two, we have a force to reckon with. And we are pushing each other. You know, we hire some really good people. And it's always a little bit of a kick in the pants. You know, it's like, oh man, they're better educated, right? I mean, they're, as far as technology goes, they're a step ahead of us. Come on, boys. Come on, gals. Let's kick it in another gear. Sometimes it feels like clients feel or think they have to point out a lot of the negative because we are too complacent. I can put their mind at ease. We are pretty hard on ourselves. And there's always room for improvement. But we also need to realize that we're working with Mother Nature, and sometimes she makes for a lousy business partner. In good years, we're not as good as we think we are. In bad years, we're not as bad as somebody makes us look. That's agriculture. That's very basic. But if you haven't grown up in farming, some people don't understand that. They just don't. You know, they come with a spreadsheet and say, well, but look at my spreadsheet. In year 4, I put in 3 tons an acre. I said, yeah, you put that in, not me. I can help you to come up with a business plan, okay? Because we want you to succeed. But there could be a year like 2020. Who saw that coming? But I guarantee you, my dad always said, 1 in 10 years in the grape growing business, you have to expect very little or zero. It could be a hailstorm that's more prevalent in Europe, or a deep freeze or something. And then that's when you go about it in a different way. You know, you have to put some money aside when times get really lean. You cannot expect that, well, we want to get better every year. Really. I haven't heard that from a wheat grower or an apple grower or a sugar beet guy. We want to get better every year. Yeah, there's a difference that we are farming a perennial crop, right? We carry over the good and the bad from one season to another. If you do a lousy job in canopy management, we're going to deal with it next year. That's the difference between a row crop farmer, where it's an annual crop. He can plow that stuff under, he or she, whereas we are stuck with whatever we've done, good or bad.
So going back on what you talked about earlier, I'm curious about the transition for you. First, you talked about the differences between farming in Europe, farming in Oregon. I'm curious about that transition for you and the kind of learning curve for you, and also the learning curve going from Willa Kinsey and a single estate to RP, where you're working with many different places, many different estates. So tell me about your transition periods for me.
Yes, the transition from Europe to here, for a vineyard of our size that we farmed, that our family farmed, 25 acres, and for Swiss standard that was fairly large, we had a good level of mechanization. We had a hedger, we had a leaf puller, we had a shoot lifter for shoot positioning. We're talking about the 80s, right? Coming here, I felt like putting back in the early 70s, late 60s. Some things that were done the old-fashioned way. Why? Because there was an abundant labor force, right? Labor was not an issue. Absolutely, I mean, in the early 2000s, I didn't hear about labor being in short supply. If labor is not in short supply, you don't have to think about technical progress. You don't have to think about mechanization. It sure is here now. And we are looking at every angle and every possibility to cut down on manual labor. We have to. But here's the thing. We can be on the forefront as a vineyard management company. If our clients do not agree, if they don't want us to mechanically pick their grapes, then we just have expensive equipment standing around. So we have to do that in collaboration with our clients. And sometimes take down a few walls, educate them, and also look at the quality aspect. I mean, there's some mechanization, for example, hand hedging or mechanical hedging. There is no difference. There is no difference, right? That's widely accepted. Leaf pulling, depending what level of grapes or quality level of grapes you are targeting. But I believe Pinot Noir in the $2,000 range per ton cannot be handpicked anymore. It's too expensive. You know, I do have the business side in me. I also have the business interest of the client on my mind. I understand if they're spending more with results partners than what they're making in grape sales, there's something wrong. Absolutely wrong. That's why we're also involved in helping them to sell the grapes at a decent price. I mean, it's also, you know, there's a vested interest right there. But I see, well, we talk about that later, the challenges ahead of us, okay? So, number one, some of the farming methods that I felt like, there's a lot that could be done. And that has happened in over the last 2 decades. And then I had to learn Spanish. Came relatively easy. I had Latin in school, so Latin-based language, not a problem. But I also had to, you know, the Swiss are, although the land is neutral, we're not neutral, okay? I do have an opinion. Sometimes people think I'm opinionated. I believe if you're in a leadership role, you have to take a stand. You have to stand for something. The worst you can do is just be kind of a washcloth, wishy-washy. And the people who are looking at you, they don't even know if you exist. But that, you know, I implemented some things at Willa Kinsey where I was told, well, you can't do that. We've done it. No problem. Maybe not industry standard. I've done it. So, but you know, you have to accept that there's a little bit of friction. And I would say the way I go on you, or you're going to hate my guts. That's just the way it is, you know. But I have a little bit of a fighter mentality in me. I grew up that way. Nothing was given for free. You have to work for it. You have to fight for it. And you can, when I say fight, you can do that with peaceful means, right? I always say the other party is choosing the level of engagement. If they take the high road, my golly, I take the high road too. If they want to play dirty, I also have it in me. And you know, I told the former CEO of OVS once, I mean, there's several ways you can win a game if you play soccer or a team sport, you know. I mean, the mean way is you take out the best player on the other side. Now, I'm not talking about a brutal foul where you break his leg, but you could hire him, right? Just talking in business language now. But, you know, when people think it's not that competitive out there, it is competitive. You know, we're not the only game in town, and that's a good thing. I believe competition makes everybody better. It keeps you honest. It keeps you on task. And I would lie to you if I told you that we never lost a client. It happens. And it's not a good feeling. We take our losses seriously, and they hurt. And sometimes, I think our senior managers would say we don't celebrate our wins enough. But that's the Swiss in me. I'm somewhat of an amplifier. You know, I try not to take the lows too low, but then the highs are not to take as high either. I kind of try to cut the peak. So, the biggest adjustment when I joined RP was that just a general idea of customer service. You know, I thought, man, I know how to grow grapes. You know how to grow grapes. You could be the best in growing grapes and you still fail. If you don't understand, wait a minute, you're working for somebody else. Let's find out what their goals are. Maybe they want to make money. Maybe they want to have a beautiful vineyard. Maybe they want to have a high-scoring wine and see their name on their label. Let's find out what their goals are and work towards them. Maybe their idea of sustainability is way up on the priority list. And I mean, I would say I learned quickly, but I made some mistakes as well in that first year. I was too much of a farmer and not enough of a service provider. So, and then the other question was, you asked me about transition. And then, you know, the good thing is when so I became president, we were at about 1,000 acres. Now we're farming 3,200 in the Willamette Valley. We have 300 acres in Southern Oregon. We just started in Walla Walla and the Gorge. We're probably combined 3,700 acres. And for a lot of people, it sounds like, wow, how can you keep everything straight? I don't have to. We have good people who help me to keep it straight. And you grow, and you can build up an organization, and you improve procedures. But the most important thing are the people working for us. And when you grow, you can, as I said, you can afford to hire the best in the business. And then you can compensate them adequately too. You know? I mean, I can say, well, look at the prestige. Well, the prestige doesn't pay the bills, right? I can tell you, I took a pay cut when I joined RP. It wasn't very long-lived, but I took a pay cut. And I wasn't worried about the prestige. I'm also not worried about my title. That stuff doesn't mean much to me. Now, I can also tell you when I have a superior, I have high expectations. I have high expectations in myself. You better be really good in what you do. And otherwise, I'm going to be a pain in your neck. And there's some company commanders in Switzerland who could attest to that. I have always had more problems up than I had down. But you know, I always said, if we ever had to go to battle, who am I going with? The soldiers behind me. And I see it still that way today. And I don't mind being in the trenches.
So what do you look for when you are hiring people, and what do you do to develop the talent that you have?
That is a good question. Personally, I like farming background. It could be that they don't even know what a grapevine looks like. We can teach them that. But a general understanding about farming. Education helps, absolutely, but it's not everything. We had guys with fancy degrees and they failed. And when people fail, I also look at myself, I look at our management, what we could have done to prevent it, right? But there has to be, if you work for RP, you are not choosing the easiest life. We are somewhat of a tough company to work for. We're working long hours, we stretch people, and some people like that. You know, I always say everybody has a ceiling, but if you get those people as close to the ceiling as possible, man, we have done a good job. And then it's like, take on more responsibility, pay is following, right? I don't want people to ask for raises. It is our job to recognize what the performance is and then offer a raise. I was taught that way. Dad told me, if you do a good job, people will compensate you the way you deserve it. And if you feel like you have to ask for raises, then you need to look at that company, maybe, or you look at yourself, right? I also believe that, back to the way I grew up, you need to understand and know the basics. If you want to go in our company, we can't have holes in the foundation. And the foundation is viticulture. That includes operations. That includes actually the task in the field. If you tell me, well, I graduated from whatever, so-and-so university with magna cum laude, whatever, then, and you want to be a manager on day one, say, okay, you know how to do this. Show me how to do that. No. How in the heck do you want to manage people? I mean, how do you want to earn their respect if you can't do what you ask them to do? I mean, that's basic leadership. It doesn't work. And make no mistake, it doesn't matter how many years somebody went to school. We have some very smart people. We have some very smart people, and they grew up in Mexico. And I tell you, they ran circles around me in certain situations. And I was just like, wow, they know how to do something out of nothing. Just a natural talent. You know, call it common sense, call it street smarts. Now, the top-notch people, they can combine the street smarts and the book smart, right? And those are the ones I want. But let's not eliminate common sense. And I found out, unfortunately, over the last 10 years, common sense is not that common anymore. I mean, sometimes I'm just like, why did that happen? Have you thought about gravity? But I also flipped tractors once myself. So, maybe, yeah.
You talked earlier about the relationship between the vineyard manager or vineyard side and the winemaker winery side, and how it's kind of naturally a struggle sometimes. Tell me about getting used to that, first at Viticulture and now dealing with many more winemakers, and how you kind of navigate so that both sides are happy.
Yes. it's really interesting, and there's some winemakers who they know quite a bit about growing grapes. The others, not so much. And vice versa. I mean, if you test my winemaking skills, I might disappoint you. Where I come from, it goes back to the transition you asked me to explain, or the challenge of transition. So in Switzerland, you know, when you're an apprentice and you learn how to grow grapes, there's also a winemaking part built into the education. It goes hand in hand. Most vintners in Switzerland, they're owner-operators. They grow the grapes, they make the wine, they sell the wine, all in one. If they have a problem, it's all internally, you know? It's like, winemaker, vineyard manager, but it's all in one person. So when I came over here, I was surprised by the rift. And the winemakers think that we're not flexible, and we think they don't get out of bed early enough. You know, it's just. But I respect what they do. They're also under a lot of pressure. They have to make a product that is selling and, you know, scoring high, etc., etc. My goal is that we can help them. Listen, if I can make other people look good, I do my job. So a year ago, pre-COVID-19, I said to my team, I want to take an active step to work together with winemakers much better. We created a group of 5-6 winemakers that I met once a month, and we talked about things that are going on in the vineyard so that they have a better understanding. Or also, if they have ideas, we can discuss it. We can discuss it on a table, and we don't ridicule it. We don't. We take it seriously, right? And we put some nuts and bolts on that idea. And vice versa. You know, I have questions about the winemaking, cost of goods, because when I hear, the grapes are too expensive, I got a little problem with that. Because I know what goes into a bottle of wine, what the grape component is. Now, let's have a discussion and talk about the other costs of goods. Let's have a discussion what the sales side is costing, or the marketing side, so that we're talking the same language, right? We're in this together. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, you know, I don't need another Zoom meeting. We're going to restart the conversation once the masks come off. But I very much respect the winemakers. And I also hope that they respect what we do. And never forget, it's a compromise. You know, compromise for a lot of people is an ugly word. It's not for me. Whatever I do is a compromise, right? So you can wait for the perfect day. Say, well, I want to avoid soil compaction. We're going to wait, all right? And then you wait too long. You cultivate the soil. Now you have a nitrogen boost at the wrong time. And it could affect fruit set, because there's nitrogen accumulation in the primordial cluster, just burning them off, right? That can cost you your job. So I tell you I'm a decent farmer because I don't overanalyze, but I claim I make good decisions on time, rather than the perfect solution too late. That's another one of my mottos. And I tell the other guys working for us the same thing. You don't have to be 100% right all the time. Just don't be wrong, right?
So if a new client reaches out to you, to your company, tell me what the kind of process is for getting to know, getting to understand the goals, and deciding if you're a proper fit, and what your role will be in their work.
Yes. So my personal role in that one is relatively small, because we have Luc Pedotti, who is the Director of Vineyard Development, and he usually takes these potential new clients under his wings. Includes a site visit, a site evaluation, a cost estimate, and that all includes conversation about what are your goals. You know, we ask the question, what are you going to do with the grapes? And some clients are like, why are we talking about grapes? We have not even planted a vineyard yet. And we're like, well, that should be a part of the business plan, right? Eventually, the question is, you're going to sell the grapes, or you're going to make wine for yourself, or what's the deal here? Or do you need a winemaker who does make the wine at his facility, kind of custom make style? So, you know, we try to guide them along, and we are doing the best job when we are 100% in charge of operations. That doesn't mean the vineyard owner doesn't have any input, just to be very clear. But operationally, where it can go sideways is if they say, well, you know, I have a son who can do the tractor work, or I have an employee, I have a full-time employee, and he will do some of the vineyard work. That never or hardly ever goes well. We want clear responsibilities. We have clients who do the tractor work themselves. It's a minority, it's a very small number. But it's a clear delineation between their responsibilities and us doing the crew work. But it takes more communication. So we're charging the full management fee if somebody is opting out and says they want to do a part of themselves, because from a coordination standpoint, it takes more time and more resources. Because when we want to send a crew and the client wants to spray, well, that doesn't work, right? As an example. So we're very clear about that. I tell you what, transparency, transparency, transparency. No surprises, no BS. I tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you ask me. I rather have, and I turned business down. And I told that potential client, and he was talking from a profile, a high profile client. I said, you know, I'd rather disappoint you once, and it is now, than month after month. Because I didn't see a path to succeed.
So for a company your size and the growth you've had, what are the strengths that has brought for you, and what that you can offer, and what are the weaknesses? What does it take away?
So under strength, I could mention a lot of them. We have a lot of operational flexibility. When we have a tractor go down, as an example, we can replace that tractor in a hurry. You know, that job still gets done with different resources. If we need an extra boost in a sub-region, we can send a crew over there to help out. I mean, there's a lot going on like this. There's a lot of redundancy. If, for some reason, if I didn't return to work tomorrow, or after this interview, RP still exists. And they do quite well. We're not centered around a person, you know. We're centered around a team. We have procedures in place that are really solid. Also, I want to say, and this is the truth, if you're managing vineyards for RP, you deal with several different locations. You gain so much more experience than if you work in one location. I mean, it's almost like dog years, you know? The ratio is 1 to 7. I'm not kidding you. When people think, well, but if you're not here all the time, then the vineyard is not taken care of. No, but I can tell you with the experience we have, we can look at the vineyard and figure out in a relatively short time what's going on. We don't have to walk the entire vineyard all day. It's like, how do you feel today? Plant number 55. So that's the advantage of a vineyard management company. Our people are really flexible. And down to tractor operators. You know, they're driving a New Holland one day and the Kubota the next day and the John Deere the third day. And they probably have a hard time if they had to go back to an estate model where it's more rigid, right? The same with our vineyard managers. They learn really quickly to keep a lot of balls up in the air. So, yeah, I mean, if we have to compete with estate vineyard managers, I take them on any day. I really do. So, our strengths, we are a full service deal, full service. You live at the other end of the world and we take care of your vineyard. You don't have to worry about anything except sending us a check. We take it seriously. I actually put a little bit of my heart in it too, more than a little bit. But I also want to know that the vineyard owners are in it. So, you know, if I have questions and we have to make a decision, a timely decision, and I don't hear back, then I'm wondering, well, first of all, it's like, okay, I can remind them, no problem. But if it's just silence, then I start wondering how important that vineyard is to them. And that, I mean, let's match the intensity level here, you know? The other thing is, by moving our people around, and we do it in sub-regions, you know, we have tractor operators that are working in probably 3 locations, right? But if we needed them somewhere else in an emergency, sure, they can hop on another tractor. But they're also not becoming territorial. You know, it's like, well, this is my garden, don't step in it. The garden is big for us. There's room for everybody. So
for you and your team here, how do you judge a vineyard or potential vineyard site? What are you looking for in a site that is going to be cultivated, and what do you look for in an existing vineyard that you're taking over when it comes to if you want to work with it and how you'll handle it once you do work with it?
In general, we're not too picky. I can tell you, I took on a vineyard that was in very poor shape, but I knew why. And it was relatively easy to revive the vineyard and make it look quite good over 2 seasons. And the client thinks we are magicians, and we are not. It was fairly simple. Mm-hmm. So it actually has more to do with if the personalities between clients and us is clicking, a general understanding how we operate. Mm-hmm. You know, that we don't have, although we also are farming estates where we have people there all the time. Mm-hmm. But on a 20-acre vineyard, we can't park somebody there 100% of the time. It would break the bank. The budget would go out the window in a hurry. Okay. But that's something that some people have to get used to. Well, you go in there when it does work? Yes. That's why we are able to keep the cost at a certain level that makes sense economically, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, sure, we look at aspect, we look at soil type, we look at elevation. I mean, all the good stuff that you heard from others as well, right? Mm-hmm. But the human factor is very, very important. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not the best salespeople. I'm not, okay? But I want to be transparent, I want to be honest. That is such an integral part of how I want to live my life. I can't handle BS. I tell you what drives me nuts. When we order parts or material and we have to follow up, we don't hear nothing from the vendor, right? Anything. When I was going to be here? Tomorrow. Yeah, I heard that before. Tomorrow turns into 2 weeks. Okay? Mm-hmm. You know how it is in Europe? They will tell you 2 weeks. And you're going to be like, whoa. But It's the honest answer. You're going to deal with it. You will find a way around it. You will make it work. But this tomorrow, they tell you what you want to hear. I don't want that. You know, when I call a venue manager and after I'm looking at the site, it looks a little hairy. I call him up and I say, hey, when do you think we have a crew here to lift wires or to shoot position? Oh, tomorrow. I said, no. Just, this is a question. How does it fit in your schedule, in your plan? When are we going to have a crew here? Be honest. 4 days. Okay, that works. If it doesn't work, I tell them. Said, you need to reject the whole thing. But they don't have to give me what I want to hear just because I'm the president. Doesn't make any sense, right?
You talked earlier about the kind of the sustainability factor and something that varies from vineyard to vineyard. Tell me about, in terms of your practices, what's the level? How far up the organic biodynamic scale do you go when working with vineyards?
So you need to know that we are a la carte service. The client tells us what level they want to achieve. So we're farming, actually a minority of our acreage is conventional. We have a high percentage of sustainable acreage. We have certified organic acreage. We have biodynamic acreage. We do whatever the clients wants us to do. Customer service, right?
When it comes to those, have you seen a major shift in your time at RP for people asking for sustainable, organic, biodynamic?
There's yes. There's a clear movement away from herbicides, and there's probably a point, I have to say. I mean, listen, if I see moss that thick underneath vine rows, I question if that soil is really healthy, okay? I mean, repeatedly, herbicide after herbicide, and too high of a concentration at the wrong time. So I see that. I have no problem to find alternatives, you know, if it's mechanical cultivation or you name it, or just keep mowing. Mm-hmm. So there's a trend towards more, actually away from chemicals and more towards sustainable farming practices. Now here's a question, and I raised that before with other people. When we're talking about sustainability, and our crews have to hand-hoe, you know, it's tough work. Mm-hmm. It's tough work. I can't lose sight of that. That's when it becomes really, really, really muddy. It's not black and white. Mm-hmm. It's gray. And when you don't see it, you know, when you are far apart from the action, you never think about that. And it's my obligation to raise that concern. So we have crews out there, right? I have to think about their back. I want them to live a long life and happy life, right? They're not disposable. Mm-hmm. They're people. Mm-hmm. And opinionated, sure.
So you talked about kind of getting hired at RP and becoming the president fairly quickly after that. Take me through what a typical day or week or month looks like for you. Obviously, I know you got a lot going on. So tell me, what is kind of your day-to-day, week-to-week look like?
So I expected the question. I thought about it. I can tell you, I wake up in the morning, I have no idea what's coming my way. Seriously. I mean, I have a list of things to do, and I prioritize A, B, C. A, it needs to happen today, and B, soon. C, when I get to it. And then it can be a lot of things. So I do spend some time at the office. You know, it involves more admin work than what I was used to before I became president. That's just the nature of the beast. And it's not the most rewarding part of the job, by the way. You know, when you choose agriculture as a career, the most pleasure I'm getting out of is when you see the results of your labor. At the end of the day, man, I plowed a field, look at that. But I mean, let's be realistic, you know. I'm also in a different income level. Well, you have to delegate, and sometimes I have to do the tough jobs, right? Involved in HR. I don't like to terminate people, but it's also part of my job. And on the other side, the hiring part, yeah, that's the more enjoyable side. I mean, I have client meetings. Yesterday I met with a winemaker. I also have to report up the chain. I work on some financials with the help of Deborah Leitner, our business manager. It can be a lot of things. And it varies from season to season. I mean, from growing season, you know, winter time. I still have clients myself, so I do some estimating. I do I review invoices. But also, I want to be available when people have issues. The door is always open. If somebody calls me, and it can be, and sometimes it's probably to a default. Somebody calls me and says, hey, I want to talk to you. Sometimes I say, hey, have you talked to your supervisor first? Yes. Okay. All right. When do you want to meet? Now I want to be available. I'm not on a high horse. I don't belong there. But it's important, you know. Independent of how big the company is, we want to be approachable.
All right. So as Results Partners has grown, we talked about this a little bit off camera. Obviously, you're kind of a big fish now in the industry when it comes to vineyard management. Tell me about reputation of Results Partners and what you want it to be, and what you have to overcome with other people's perceptions of your work.
Yes, our reputation has improved. I know that for a fact. I mean, we have a vit department now, and we can really dig deep on the viticulture side, if that's what clients want us to do. And Lee is heading up that department, best in the business by far. We have a Jessica, she's the viticulturist. I mean, she's a superstar. I mean, she's very good. Before, we were lacking a little bit of attention to detail. That's one thing that I stress with the vineyard managers. You know, we have to pay attention to detail. But it also, kind of has to match where clients want to be in terms of expenses. When we are farming a production vineyard, they're shooting for high tonnage, but they're getting 2,000 a ton for Pinot Noir. That vineyard has to be farmed differently than a high profile, you know, a high reputation vineyard. And we accomplish this by creating cost estimates that reflect the different tiers. And then we convert it into metrics, how many hours we can spend on each task. And our vineyard managers are making sure it happens within those metrics, most part. So we have gotten better to kind of differentiating the different vineyards and farming practices. Certain size, we, personally speaking, you know, I could be somewhere every day, well, not during COVID-19, but somewhere at a social event, right? I mean, every evening I could go somewhere. But I also want to have a private life. I believe that people who can recreate, create. And when everything becomes one, you know, we're already on the job, not 24 hours a day, but for quite a while. I mean, my day starts at 5 o'clock. That's when I get a lot of stuff done. Nobody calls me yet. Emails are rolling in already from vineyard managers. And I check email before I go to bed, right? That's just how I choose how to kind of go about my workload. But I can also tell you that our social circle, my wife and mine, there are some people from the wine industry, but not that many. and I do it on purpose. I want a little bit of separation. Okay? The last thing I want to do is on a Saturday night to talk about wine and grapes and this and that. Okay? Then I'd rather talk cattle or we play games. That's all good. But that's how I can charge and recharge my batteries. And if I owned the company, I understand that would be different. Well, it's all one. I have to show up at that shindig, and I have to go and show my face over there. The advantage we have is there are 5 of us who can represent the company. I am not the face or the only face of our company to the outside. Thankful for that.
Tell me about the communication within your company. Obviously, you mentioned kind of the tiers of management and middle management. Tell me about how you are checking in on all these different vineyard sites, all these different vineyard managers, all this different work that's going on a daily basis.
Yes. So I can be the client manager for certain vineyards, and then I have a vineyard manager who is making sure that things are happening. So he's in charge of equipment operations and the crew work. And I check in, I look at different, look at the vineyard overall, I have maybe a few questions. But operationally, it's really in the hands of our vineyard managers. And then they have certain crew supervisors, they have equipment operators to work with. And then also we work with the Vit department closely, and we work with the service department closely. So we have an in-house service department, and they're repairing our equipment and client-owned equipment. So we're really self-contained as much as we can. And then you're in the driver's seat, right? If you rely on third parties, it's always tough. Same with vineyard development. We used to use outside service providers, and our timelines and the budgets went sideways in a hurry. Now, we do all the clearing work in-house, we do the layout, we do the deer fences, everything. We install irrigation, we even, and that's in Luke's department, he is the general contractor for barn buildings or pond construction. I mean, it's really a one-stop shop.
We talked a couple times today about mechanization and labor, and I know it's obviously a big concern of yours. We've heard often that labor is getting more scarce, more difficult to find, obviously getting more expensive. Tell me about the changes you've seen in mechanization in Oregon and the kind of the acceptance of it, and what you see as you look ahead for the future of labor and mechanization in the vineyard.
Yes. So when I started at RP in 2010, we didn't own a single hedger for 700 acres producing. And it probably made sense at that time, but that was the first thing we changed. We purchased a hedger, and then we really picked up the pace coming from the Stone Age to modern times. In 2013, we rented a machine harvester, and Luke Pedati was really instrumental in that. I mean, he came over from winemakers where they were already machine harvesting all their acreage, or most of them. So in the meanwhile, we have 5 machine harvesters. We tried wire lifters. We look at new equipment coming in. We tried the Klima, the piece of equipment that removes the canes, the pruning canes. That will be in the near future for us to probably purchase one. We played around with our machine harvesters during the growing season to be multifunctional, where we can hedge. You just change the head. Instead of machine harvest head, you have a spray head on it, or you have a hedger on it, and you can attach a mower, but we are not. It gets a little tricky. You're putting a lot of hours on an expensive, very expensive machine. that to this day you can also do with a much less expensive tractor. But there's no doubt, labor is going to go up, and there are fewer people in the field. We have an aging workforce that we often ignore. People cannot work faster every year. Just because the costs are going up doesn't mean that now we just work a little bit faster to keep the dollar amount the same. It's not going to happen. So that scale is tipping in favor of mechanizing. Now we have to be realistic. A lot of the vineyards are not set up for machine harvest. The trellis is not set up. The headlands are not set up. There's not even a loading zone to load grapes on a semi. And the same goes for wineries. There are a lot of wineries that cannot receive grapes delivered on a commercial sized truck, on a semi truck. So there's a whole, it's not just the idea of machine picking, but there's logistically a whole chain reaction following, right? Now when we develop a vineyard, in most cases we set it up for machine harvest. Even, slope is not exclusive. We pick grapes on pretty steep. I was surprised and kind of, almost scared. But it's everything else. Where do you turn? Can you bring in a good-sized truck? So the acceptance has risen, has gone up, and it always takes a few pioneers, right? And the pioneers are, first they take some heat, and when it works out, there's some envy. But it takes people who really, Joel Myers, 2007, bought a machine harvester. The industry was not ready yet. Although he was on the forefront. He saw this whole thing coming. But that's why it's important that we, in collaboration with the clients, find solutions. We can't shove the machine harvester down their throat. And then there are other growing regions, where they, you look at Washington, certain areas in California, it's minimal touch, minimal hand touch. It's all box pruned. They are shooting with equipment. Very, very few man hours, maybe 40 per acre versus 180. But it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful, and we have to be honest about it. And on this note, when a client says, well, we need to lower costs, okay, we bring them solutions. We bring them options. But then they say, well, I don't think so-and-so winemaker will accept that. Well, then what else do you want me to do? Again, I tell you, farming grapes, it's not that hard. Farming grapes for other people, not that easy. Because, there are other parties involved, right? It's not just what I want. My ego is not that big. I can overcome that. But we need to listen to the clients. But we have, overall as an industry, we have not made enough progress to push this whole idea of mechanization forward. I think we're going to see a lot more, like a steeper distribution of classes of vineyards. Some high production, low cost. There's nothing wrong with that. They're the ones who are making actually a little bit of money. And then you have the high tier, super expensive stuff, small blocks, steep, high density, just tough to farm. But if the quality of the grapes is commanding, let's put it that way, if the quality of the grapes makes an outstanding wine, and they can sell it at a price that all makes sense, no problem. But the ones in between are the problematic ones that I feel have a tough future.
So what do you think that future looks like, specifically the future for vineyard work, for labor, for mechanization? What will Oregon's vineyard life look like in a decade from now?
In a decade from now, hand picking will be a luxury. It will still happening, but it will only happen for let's say, $60 plus, just to give you a reference point. It's a tough question. It's a tough question. I think high density, and when I say high density, we're talking about 6 feet or under vine space, row spacing. It's gonna go away. And the ones who are there, I mean, we keep farming somehow, but what we plant new, we're not going under 6 feet, under 7 feet. I stay corrected. Okay, that's one point where we really dig in our heels a little bit. You know, we had a client, or have a client, and he has a consulting winemaker. I grabbed that client, not physically, but told him to follow me to the kitchenette, and said, so and so, just believe me on this one. Trust me, you don't want to plant under 7 feet. We're setting this up for the next 30 years. It would be irresponsible of us to recommend that we're going, whatever the idea was, 1 meter by 1 meter, although it's more work for us, right? And more work for us means more revenue. But that's where honesty comes in. And he followed our advice. Thank you. Because I want to, you know what? I want to go to bed at night and when I brush my teeth, look in the mirror and live with that. You know, and be able to lay down and get a good night's sleep. And when we start deviating from that, I'm probably not with the company anymore, if we ever do that. You know, I'm not changing companies very often. I really don't. But I want to stand behind the outfit I'm working for and be able to identify myself.
So we talked a lot about the changes you've seen in Oregon viticulture specifically. What are you talked earlier about the kind of the challenges ahead. What are, in addition to what we just talked about, what are the other challenges ahead for viticulture specifically and that you just see on the horizon for Oregon wine in general?
Yes. So we talked about labor, and that could fill hours of discussion. Grape prices have not really gone up in quite a while the bottle prices have gone up substantially. Somebody needs to explain that to me. I don't get it. You know, there was a rule quite a while ago. When I started working here, there was a rule of bottle price times 100 equals the tonnage price. So a $20 bottle would translate into $2,000 a ton. You know how many wines are selling now for, well, retail. And I understand that the winery folks would tell me, well, not everything sells at retail. I get it. But 3,000 a ton, 35, 4,000 a ton should not be unheard of. And 3,000 is doable, right? But 4,000, it's kind of the exception now. While the farming costs have gone up. And they're thinking, RP is raking it in. Well, I'd like to show them a graph that shows minimum wage, and we're not paying our people minimum wage. They don't even show up for minimum wage. You know, the unofficial minimum wage is always $1.50 higher than where we're at. So, and then it's not just, as you know, it's not just the pay on the check. You have payroll taxes, you have insurance, you have, oh my goodness, you can add easily 15, 16%. And then on the permanent staff, we just did the math the other day, 38% overhead with health insurance, with 401k, vacation, holidays, and I gladly pay it. I gladly pay it if the performance is good and the attitude is good. You know, people think I'm judgmental. Yes, I do judge. I judge by attitude and performance. I do not judge by skin color. I don't judge by education. I don't judge by gender. It all comes down to what do you stand for? What are you made of? Not where you come from. What are you made of?
I like it. That must be it must be interesting going through the industry that way. You must have some interesting stories. Oh, we talked about the pandemic a couple of times already.
Yes.
Tell me about how COVID changed your work life and what you had to do with the crews, especially, and what you think has changed in the industry during the pandemic that may stay after we come out of it. What changes have come that might stick around?
Yes. I tell you, I mean, it has been a challenge for all of us. I personally miss having everybody all together. Well, I have a chance to tell them a few things, what's going well, what doesn't go well. I miss that part. I really feel that's taken away from me. Mm-hmm. And I also enjoy that part. Mm-hmm. And that's a tool that's so important to me. It's not the same when I go from one crew to another, or I talk to people one-on-one, although that matters too. And I just the sheer fact that we have to cover up. You can't read people's faces anymore. Mm-hmm. Body language. That is a little bit of a challenge for me. The Zoom meetings, yeah, but it's not the same like in person. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. There's so much outside of the verbal communication going on that you can read into or read between the lines, and I think that's important. Mm-hmm. When we're dealing with people, right? We had a lot of, as you know, additional requirements, bathrooms, double up on bathrooms, hand sanitizer, all this and that, and just to explain that to people, to our workers, hey, please, I understand, the Latin culture is different than the Scandinavian culture. Scandinavians are happy not to hug. Hispanics, they will never go away, right? They're just more kind of warmer people. Mm-hmm. So it must be hard for them too. We had a few cases who had COVID. We had to make sure we follow protocol. The ones who were exposed, yeah. I mean, I was really worried. I tell you, I was really worried how harvest will go. And all in all, we fare quite well as far as people goes, not in terms of yields and the smoke. Huh? But when you have entire crews not showing up, which could have happened, then you're really in a pickle. So I wonder if you ever go back to shaking hands. But you're talking about when we hire people, I want to shake somebody's hand. I want to see if they have, a little bit of a grip to it, or just another washcloth. I mean, if you're an egg, you better have a grip to it. I want to, yeah.
I like that. You mentioned the fires, obviously, a whole other thing to deal with in 2020. Tell me about that. Tell me about reacting to that and preparing people to work during that situation.
Yes. So we were picking 4 days after the fires broke out. It was a Friday. And we heard that some competitors decided not to pick to make a statement. Okay? I told our senior managers, it's not even up for discussion. RP is going to pick. And here's what we do. We give everybody a KN95. We make it a requirement for the full-time employees. We can't make it a requirement for the contract laborers. But a high recommendation to wear them. We're going to pick what we need to pick, call it a day, go home. Instead of taking on another 4 hours doing something else, right? I personally spoke with a few guys, contract laborers. I said, so are you opposed to picking? No, if you guys don't pick, we go somewhere else. We're going to work somewhere else. Okay. Well, then we'd rather have them work for us, somewhat in a controlled environment. And here's another thing. You know, when COVID-19 broke out, we were considered essential business. I made it very clear that during harvest, we are very essential business. If the wineries want us to pick, and the vineyard owner expects us to pick, guess what we're doing? We're picking grapes. And there's another side note. I was thinking about the legal implications. If we let that stuff hang a few more days, and now the winery says, smoke taint, sorry guys, it could fall on us. But I understand, and I heard that on social media, you know, some pictures showed up, and it's like, how can you risk the life of these people? I can also tell you that this guy was out there with the people for the entire duration of the pick every day. And the same thing for our senior managers. We were not hiding inside an office. We were not hiding inside a cab with the air conditioning on. We were out there with the people. And I can stand it behind it 100%. If somebody has a problem, come to me.
Did you feel that it was, you mentioned a tough harvest for a number of reasons. Did you feel like it was a successful harvest in that regard?
Oh, it's very hard to associate success and 2020, especially harvest. I mean, it was miserable picking for the people. The clusters were tiny, it was slow, I felt bad, but I can also tell you I was more than on one day, I was picking alongside the crew. And you can say, well, that's not the president's job. On that day, it was. Other than standing there and looking pretty, I thought, you know what, I'm going to pitch in. And that's how you motivate people. And I can also tell you, we had some tractor operators standing around the trailer, talking to one another. And I thought, I wonder how long it would take before they catch on. It took me about 8 buckets, and that was in 2010. In 2020, there was probably an hour of picking. I kind of got a little mad. I walked outside and I said, guys, what's wrong with this picture? And they're like, I'm probably the only white guy picking grapes in Yamhill County. And I gladly do it. But I only do it if you help. You can grab buckets, you can help out the pickers, save them a little time, save them a little energy. But if you keep talking, this guy stops picking. And I handed them a clipper, go to work. That was the end of that story. And when I showed up, everywhere else, the world already traveled. But you can only do it if you do it yourself, okay? And they can't even be mad at me. You know what my nickname is? The Swiss Hammer.
That is fantastic. I love that. I love that. So, looking back at your time at Wilkinson and at RP, do you have particular favorite memories, favorite moments, favorite things that you've done, accomplishments you've had that you look back on particularly fondly?
Yeah, a lot of them. I mean, I can tell you that every day I make an effort to smell the roses. If the roses are not blooming, it could be wildlife that I see. You know, bald eagles flying over, or deer, or elk grazing. I mean, it's a beauty that we get out and about so much. You know, we see a lot of Yamhill County, or Marion County, and Polk County, and or a funny sign on a gate of a property. You think, well, that's just hilarious. And I really believe if you can't enjoy those small things anymore, we're in deep trouble. In general, not just me. So I love to be outside. I love nature. Sure, you know, if I see a beautiful crop hanging, I feel good about it. But I also know that it takes a lot of people to make that happen. That's not me. That's not my job. It's not my work. It's our fruit of labor. So I know kind of my place, you know, that I'm not, the world does not evolve around me, you know. I hope I'm a piece of it, although a small one.
What about as you look ahead for yourself personally? What comes next for you?
I want to do this a few more years, and full throttle. I mean, pedal to the metal. A few more years. And then I hope that when everything is said and done, after my days at RP are over, that when people say, well, he has done well for himself, they will also say, but the same goes for the people around him. That is important to me. And that does not include only senior managers, it includes everybody who works at RP. I hear plenty of times, oh, so-and-so has really done well for himself or herself, and I'm like, yeah, but it came at a cost. Other people didn't do so well, right? So, yeah, I mean, not to become philosophical, but we are fairly small in this world, you know, and I can't reverse climate change. I mean, I can do a few things. I can't solve the social issues we're having. But we have a little bit of an impact in our immediate surroundings. If I can make their life a little bit better, if I can provide opportunities to our workforce and they can improve their lives, that's what I see positive progress should be like, you know? Rather than handing out a fish, we teach them how to fish. I'm a strong believer in that. You know, otherwise, when people get used to handouts, bottomless.
You talked also about the changes at RP and your recent expansion into the gorge, into Walla Walla, Southern Oregon. What lies ahead for the company? What's next for RP?
Yeah, I believe we're going to grow in Walla Walla quite a bit. We're going to add a few acres in the gorge. The Red Mountains are not out of reach. Yes, we're on a growth pattern. But again, that should not be a concern for clients in the Willamette Valley. We put people in place, excellent people. The guy I hired, or we hired, Nick Mackey in Walla Walla, top notch. Top notch. They take ownership. We guide them, we support them, we help them with some, you know, what we know, what we learned. He's a quick learner. It's going to be exciting to see where we can take this. And I know the competition out there is a little bit nervous now. It took us a while too. It was not an easy going, you know. You know, it's easy to say, well, as we heard many times from Vineyard, it would be good if you guys come to town. But to take that step and actually signing a contract with us, that's a whole different story, right? And it took one client out there to have the courage to do that, and us doing a good job. And now the flywheel is actually gaining some momentum. I believe we, you know, moderately grow in the Willamette Valley, moderately. If I had to tell you percentage-wise, 3 to 5% maybe. Southern Oregon, probably a little bit less. They have been hammered with fire season after fire season. You know, that not the first time they dealt with smoke. That hurt the region overall as a reliable source for grapes, unfortunately. And grape prices are lower. I still don't quite understand how that happened. But it's a challenge. You know, when the grape prices are so low that there's not much left in the pocket of the vineyard owner, then it's not a sound business. Now, I didn't mention yet challenge of economics. On the winery side, pre-COVID-19, 60% of wineries not being profitable. That's a problem. That's a serious problem. You know, you always hear, well, the wine business is thriving. Yeah, but at one point you have to make profit, you know? The same here. And profit to me is not an ugly word. It's a necessity if you want to stay in business. And I like numbers. I like the business side of RP. I was longing for that, where it's coming to full circle. It's not just the grape growing side and providing a service, but run a profitable business, not that easy. So growing grapes, not that hard. Making wine, not that hard. Selling wine, very difficult. And running a profitable business, also difficult. Mm-hmm. And I'm not downplaying the grape growing, okay? Don't get me wrong here, or the winemaking. But I understand the challenges of we have a lot of wineries, we have a lot of different labels. I think we need to experiment a little bit outside of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I really think so. And I once mentioned with the senior management team, every so often I challenge them, and I go in just with a 2x4. And I said, it doesn't make much sense that we are growing organic grapes and we choose the most sensitive varietals, like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. They're the most susceptible to powder mildew. And that's what we're growing, and we want to. It doesn't make much sense if we are spraying organic grapes 14 times and conventional grapes 6 times. Mm-hmm. That's the truth. And so I did my thesis on interspecific grape vine varietals, okay? So the hybrids, and they are more disease resistant. Now we have a few coming on here. Mm-hmm. UC Davis came with a few. I understand the wine quality has to be there in order to produce a commercial sellable product. I get that. But Germany, for example, is way ahead of the game. They have a lot of different varietals that you hardly have to spray against downy mildew or powder mildew, and the wines are good. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of potential there. If you're a client and you say to me, well, I really want this vineyard to be unique. Okay, let's go Pinot Noir. Huh? I mean, there are many ways you can be unique. But that's probably one of them, that you bring some other varietals in the mix. Also with climate change,
You mentioned climate change a couple of times. So what have you noticed, and what do you see? What's happening there?
It's a good question. I think, like every citizen, you wonder if these severe weather events have not multiplied. More tornadoes, more hurricanes, more damage. But I'm a little bit torn, to be honest. I understand that humanity, contributes to the emissions, the heat trapping emissions. I get that. But there was an ice age where man didn't have any impact. So I can't ignore that, right? Mm-hmm. I also think that sometimes it gets politicized, unfortunately. Fossil fuels, can we replace them all? Show me. If you have a grate that breaks down in Texas during an ice storm, you can take on several million electric cars, and see what it does then. I mean, but we have smarter people than me to figure that out. But I tell you, I sure hope we can pass on this world to the next generation and be as good of a place as it is today, and hopefully better. I have seen in Switzerland where waterways were polluted in the 60s, they got it cleaned up quite well. It is possible, you can do it. But it takes an effort. It can be done.
That's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover here today? That we covered?
Just another motto of mine. The safest place for a ship is in the harbor, but that is not what it's built for. I told my parents that when I left. And I think nowadays they understand. You know, I could have never accomplished over there what I've done here on my own without the connections that I would have had over there. You know, relationships that I had to work for it myself. And I'm proud of that fact. But I'm also fortunate. I'm more fortunate that people gave me opportunities and sometimes gave me second chances or third chances. I mean, we all need that once in a while. If you're written off after the first, I wouldn't be anywhere. So, yeah, no, it was a pleasure. And here you have it.
Thank you so much for your time today, for your hospitality, for this amazing setting we've never had before for an interview. And we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
All right, thank you.